Did you feel it was necessary to A, break down each step in 3 chapters, and B, to give action points or steps and even summaries at the end of each chapter?
Yeah. I was saying in AA, they have 1,000 little saying statements about stuff that are very sticky. And of course, Jesus was very much that way when he taught. And the reason for that is it really is a life or death, heaven or hell. Like, you got to figure out how to make this truly available and accessible to people.
Hey, welcome to the podcast. This is Simple Faith. My name is Rusty George. If you have not listened to last week's episode where we introduce and talk with John Ortberg, you're going to want to listen to that first. And then we're going to jump into today's content as he jumps into our part 2 of this conversation, talking about steps. And this is based off of the Big Blue Book that is used commonly in 12-step groups, but it's also a journey into where that came from, which was biblically based, and how it can be used as a template to grow your faith. You're definitely going to want to check out what he has to say and get a copy of this book when we are done. John is an incredible author and pastor and preacher, and also has a great podcast / YouTube channel called Becoming New. And I want to encourage you to check that out because he gives daily insights into what he's reading and the scriptures and the following Jesus. You're not going to want to miss. This guy's amazing. And so here is my conversation, part 2 with John Ortberg. All right. Well, let's jump into your new book. Thanks for indulging me in those previous things I'm just interested and fascinated with. But this new book, goodness, this is a master class in transformation. It's called Steps. Now, I've been hearing you talk about 12-step groups, things like AA and groups like that. You've been talking about this for several years. What led you to an interest in that? Because I know this isn't necessarily part of your own journey where you felt like you were forced to go to one, but you were intrigued by it and you started going and it became a big part of your life, which led to this book.
Yeah. Way back when I was in school, I went to AA groups as part of education and psychology. And they were just mesmerizing. People were so honest. They were so raw. There were stories that were incredibly deep and tragic and just uproarious laughter and this very welcoming community. So if anybody's been to a 12-step meeting, they will have been struck by that. And if somebody's interested, you can actually, if you just Google AA meetings or 12-step meetings in your area, you'll get a list of them. And they'll all have a little O or a little C. C means closed, so you can only attend if you are an addict, alcoholic, or so. But O means open, so anybody can go to them. And they're riveting enough that very often folks who are pastors will ask the question, how come church can't be more like an AA meeting? And I think that they can, as long as those of us who attend church are willing to be more like alcoholics. Whereas there's this radical openness and so I was interested in it way back then. Dallas is another person who prompted that interest. He wrote in both Renovation of the Heart and The Divine Conspiracy about how if the church ever gets discipleship right, it will look a lot like the 12 steps of AA. And that's not an accident. They actually did come out of a Christian ministry, a Christian community. So that was a piece of it. Talking with people that I admired a lot, who had been a part of 12-step communities, was a big part of it. And then in my own life, about 5 or 6 years ago, just entered into a season with lots of pain. The details are not particularly important, but it was just a very painful time. And that kind of dumped me out at step 1, which is admitted that we were powerless over, fill in the blank, alcohol or fill in the blank, and that our lives had become unmanageable. And that just felt very, very congruent to me. So my own need for a power greater than myself made that real personal.
You mentioned in the book that somebody said to you at the meeting, and I don't know if it was a leader or somebody who'd been a participant for a long time, John, you're going to wish you were an alcoholic.
Yeah.
After
Yeah, he
you
said,
experience
it won't be
this.
very long before you're jealous that you're not an alcoholic.
Why is that?
And he was right. It did not take very long. When you go to meetings, one of the things you find with people is, there's all the pain that is involved in the journey of getting to the point where you can say, my name is John, I'm an alcoholic. And then what happens is through the 12 steps and all of the infrastructure around it, in AA, they will talk about, basically they are two things, that we're a fellowship and we're a program.
Hmm.
And actually that's what everybody needs. If you think all the way back to the beginning, with Israel, there was a fellowship and it was called Israel, and there was a program and that was called Torah. And we all need a program, we need a way to live, and then we need a fellowship. And what happens for folks is they get into AA, addiction, which is such an affliction and a curse and a horrible thing, also brings the gift of desperation. And, AA, they've got 1,000 sticky little sayings about stuff, and they will sometimes use that acronym, GOD, gift of desperation, which leads people to God. They will enter into the program, this way of life. It really is discipleship if you connect the dots. But they will enter into it with a kind of intensity, precisely because of the desperation, that will put them in touch with God and their power and allow them to experience transformation and enter into a way of life that changes them beyond just having the freedom to not drink, and then gives them a community of knowing and being known with absolute transparency, and then gives them a purpose so they become a part of something much larger than themselves. How can I help other people who might otherwise drink and die a hellish death so that they can receive sobriety and purpose? So now I have purpose, and they become aware. If I was not an addict, I would just be living a life of mediocre drifting. And instead, there was a shape and a transformation and a power and a presence and a purpose to my life that I would not know if I was not an addict. So thank God that I'm an addict. And he's exactly right.
You've seen over the years churches try to do their version of this, whether it's programs like Celebrate Recovery or Regenerate or those kind of things. Is there something that they're attempting to do that doesn't need to be done? I'm not asking you to take shots at them, or is there something in just a standard 12-step group that they've accomplished that it's not necessary to try to reinvent the wheel?
Yeah, there's a variety of different kind of programs, and many books and talks about people who will kind of evaluate theologically or clinically or otherwise AA. And I'm not an expert on addiction or recovery, and not really, the book is not really a theological analysis of all that sort of thing. I know have lots of friends involved with Celebrate Recovery and have been part of events there. So I have a general idea of what's going on. And I think if Celebrate Recovery helps somebody, man, that's great. I have folks that I dearly love where that's the case. Celebrate Recovery has the advantage of being explicitly Christian, so they connect the dots. And so I think that can be a really good thing. I do know of some people who have been involved in AA and they go to Celebrate Recovery, but they'll miss a certain element of rawness that they find that's present in AA in a weird way. Somehow, because it's not explicitly religious, people can have the freedom to get raw in a way that in churches we often get a little uncomfortable with. And Celebrate Recovery is kind of halfway house, where it's more raw than most churches are, but maybe not as unfiltered and uncensored as AA can tend to be. So they will probably help different people in different ways. I think if somebody is in AA, that's one of the reasons for this book. It's not a recovery book, it's a discipleship book. But I do hope that for people who are in AA, it can help them connect the dots between the 12 steps and Jesus. So I think that's a need that can be there if people are in AA, but they're not explicitly following Jesus. Um, and at the same time, it's possible that people might have an alternatively crafted experience that might miss a bit of the power that's often present in AA, because it may not hit that same level of just gut-wrenching rawness.
I hear people that go through the steps, they talk about it, and from the perspective of, I'm going through the steps again. And it may not necessarily be they've fallen off the wagon, but they need to walk through these things again. Do you find that, like what you've written in this book, which is more of a spiritual formation guide, is something that is an annual process, is a daily process, is it a rule of life? How would you characterize the steps from your perspective?
Yeah, it is a daily process. It is a way of life. And we all need a way of life. So it's connected to a major theme and emphasis in Scripture. And again, Israel and Torah, that's a way of life. Rabbis taught a way of life. They would call it a yoke. It was their understanding of the law as a way to help people actually live a way of life. Psalm 1, is a classic example. Blessed is the one who does not walk in the steps of sinners. Now that's describing the wrong kind of way of life. We all have a way of life. We all figure out, when am I going to wake up? What will I fill my mind with? What will I do with my money? What kind of people will I connect with? How will I handle anger? For better or worse, on purpose or accidentally, we all have a way of life. And so that's what the psalmist there is teaching. And it uses, the bad way and the good way. Of course, there's a million options, but as a way of saying there are better and worse ways to live our life. Jesus comes, and now the fellowship is the 12 disciples, and the way is just follow him around and do what he says. And then you get the Acts 2 church, and that's a new way of life, a new fellowship, and a new program. And so AA, out of the desperate need of addicts, stumbles into a way of life. Most folks don't know about this. The way that AA got started is Bill W., who's kind of the co-founder, got a visit from another guy who had found God, tells Bill about that. Bill gets invited into this Christian fellowship. It was called the Oxford Group. And they were a ministry that tried to recapture discipleship. Their initial name was a first century Christian fellowship. And they just quite intensely sought to practice surrender and self-examination and very transparent confession to other people and making amends for where they had done wrong and seeking guidance from God, immersing their minds in scripture and meditation, living lives of servanthood. And it was just out of the practice of those spiritual steps for the first 4 years that Bill W. and then Dr. Bob, and then eventually about 100 people discovered, as a byproduct of discipleship to Jesus, they got sobriety thrown in. And then eventually they said, there's millions of people dying of alcoholism all around the world. We got to tell them what's going on. And so they ended up writing this stuff down. Bill W. wrote down the 12 steps. If somebody reads them, anybody can Google them. You will note that they're all written in the past tense. Admitted that we were powerless over alcohol, our lives had become unmanageable, came to believe a power greater than ourselves could restore us, made the decision to turn our lives and our wills over to the care of God. And the fact that those are in past tense are real important. They got practice first and proved in real life by the empirical verification of having the power to deliver alcoholics from addiction. And they only got codified, written down after years of proven effectiveness. So in our day, we'll talk a lot about the idea of a rule of life or the idea of a discipleship pathway. Churches are all looking for something like that. And generally, the ones that have worked best got done first and written down afterwards. So the Benedictine rule of life, it was practiced first for a long time. And then eventually it got written down. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, Life Together, is another really fascinating example. if you go through, say, Life Together, Bonhoeffer's book carefully, the parallels between that and the 12 steps and the big book of AA are just remarkable. You look, for example, at the need to do very clear self-examination, and then the need to confess it with great concreteness and specificity to another flesh and blood human being. It's like they copied each other. And it's just because they're both deeply in touch with what does authentic spirit-powered transformation require. So yes, the 12 steps would be a way of life that we're never done with. It's not like often in churches, people just want to know, what's the discipleship curriculum so I can get it done in 12 weeks and move on to whatever's next. It's like, no, this is a way of life that we're never through. And there may be certain times when I need to come back to a particular step, like step 4, the fearless and searching moral inventory. And then there's other steps like step 10, continue to take personal inventory, and when wrong, promptly admitted it. That's every day. Or step 11, sought to improve our conscious contact with God through prayer and meditation. That's every day.
The book is 12 chapters, fitting, but within the, I shouldn't say that, 12 categories, and then 3 chapters apiece. Inside of that, you have some next steps with each chapter. This is a little bit different than your writing style. Did you feel it was necessary to, A, break down each step in 3 chapters, and B, to give action points or steps and even summaries at the end of each chapter?
Yeah. I was saying in AA, they have 1,000 little sayings, statements about stuff that are very sticky. And of course, Jesus was very much that way when he taught. And the reason for that is it really is a life or death, heaven or hell. Like, you got to figure out how to make this truly available and accessible to people. And so, yes, with this one, the purpose of the book very much was not to do an evaluation or theological reflection on the 12 steps. It was, how can I help people as I have been helped by learning to actually do the steps? So I tried to write it almost more like I was being my sponsor or the sponsor of the reader. And sponsors tend to have a certain kind of tone, kind of a tough love thing. So I had that voice in mind as I was doing it. When AA's other co-founder, Dr. Bob, was dying, his final words to Bill W. were, "Keep it simple, Bill." And so that expression, keep it simple, that's another one of those classic AA mantras. So yeah, very much the goal of the book is for people to actually be able to begin to do the steps and experience the power that can be accessed through them.
That's so great. I love the book, and I actually laughed out loud when I got to, we're on step 6, and this is 6A. We've done all this work, heavy lifting, trying to figure out our higher power, which obviously is God, and trying to submit everything to him, let him change me, all that. And you write this at the beginning of 6A. Now, having recognized my own powerlessness, but also God's strength, having surrendered my life and will and honestly examined my character and humbled myself by admitting all this to not only God and myself, but also to another person, now I'm ready to change. I thought, wow, we had to do a lot of work before we're even ready to begin the change process. Do you think we just try to microwave it too much, and that's what we miss?
Yeah. When I was writing the book, one of the places I went to is Hazleton in Minnesota, which is kind of the headquarters for a lot of the publishing and a lot of the work that's done around AA. They don't have any formal organization. Again, part of the beauty of Strength Made Perfect and the weakness of addiction is just addiction itself has a way of keeping folks in line on the right track, because if you get off on the wrong track, you're going to drink and die. And so I was back there talking with a guy who has taught in AA for many, many years, and he said, it's pretty easy when you're working with somebody to tell, are they just showing up at meetings to get a judge or probation officer or spouse or boss or somebody off their back? or are they really working the program?
Mm.
And so he said, the question he would ask people, I'm just quoting him verbatim here, is, are you here to save your face or save your ass? And so that question is another one of those just kind of sticky questions. And the reason it matters is that it's people who are desperate to change. There's the gift of desperation, who are willing to pursue a way of life with sufficient intensity to experience its power.
Mm.
And again, it's very interesting how you just see these threads from different places, but they speak to the human condition. In Dallas's book, The Divine Conspiracy, he talks about when he had a day alone when he was in college and he immersed himself in reading through the gospel. And he said, what I came to understand that day was the need for, and he uses exactly the same word, intensity. Hmm. And it's not about white knuckling effort. In fact, trying to change through willpower is exactly what we can't do. Mm-hmm. And that's where so often when people think about the notion of effort, they think, oh, this is bad news. I'm supposed to try really, really hard to be loving or joyful or patient or something. No, it's just like, if I'm drinking, trying really hard not to drink will not work. In fact, none of the 12 steps says made the decision to stop drinking. Mm-hmm. The power to become a different kind of person flows out of a different way of life. So it's not about using my willpower to try to change. But that way of life must be engaged with sufficient intensity. Mm-hmm. And it cannot be rushed through. And so even the first step, when I was talking to another guy that's taught in AA for a long time, he said he regards the 12 steps in AA as kind of a wisdom tradition. And wisdom traditions are always about change. Ancient Greek philosophy is mostly, how do you live your life well? Religions are wisdom tradition. He said the problem with most churches, most religions, is we have a wimpy step one. And I don't really feel powerless. I really feel like my life's kind of manageable. And as long as I have a wimpy step one, I'm going to have a wimpy steps 2 through 12. Huh. And when I thought about that, I thought it's really interesting. In that light, to think about Jesus and stories that he told or that he lived, very often they're contrasting a person that had a wimpy step one with somebody that had a devastatingly desperate step one.
Interesting.
So the Pharisee and the tax collector in the synagogue. Tax collector, desperate step one. I didn't even dare to look at heaven. Pharisee, pretty wimpy step one. Thank God I'm not like other people. The sinful woman caught in adultery, or the religious leaders ready to stone her. The prodigal son eating out of a pig trough, or the elder brother that's doing pretty well. Over and over. Simon the Pharisee hosting this dinner, or the sinful woman that throws herself at Jesus's feet and weeps. Over and over, you see somebody with a wimpy step one and somebody with a desperate step one. And it's the desperate step one they will tear a hole to get through the ceiling to Jesus and the people. And so I think that this guy is right. I think in the church, the difficulty for a lot of us is, honestly, we just don't feel all that unmanageable, and we just don't feel all that powerless. And so it's hard to drum up the intensity to say, I'm not going to rush through this. I will be willing to experience the pain of powerlessness. And when it comes to the step of turning my life and my will over, surrender, it won't just be a momentary feeling of surrender. That will actually lead to the next step, the fourth step, and I will engage in the fearless and searching moral inventory with sufficient intensity and robustness to actually come to a deeper level of understanding. And then with the fifth step, to admit to God, myself, and one other person the exact nature of every wrong thing that I have ever done. That it's like, and so, yes, leading up to that sixth step, where I become entirely ready for God to remove my defects of character. None of that material can be microwaved. If I'm desperate, I don't want to microwave it. If I'm desperate, my primary motivation is not to get through the curriculum so I can get on to something else. It's, I know this is going to kill me. Sin will kill me. Alcohol will kill me. This is now giving me a connection to God and a new kind of life, one day at a time. I'm just living one day at a time. And I know it's only as I go through this, with as much devotion as God is enabling me to muster, that I will be able to stay connected to that life today. So on the one hand, I'm working through the steps, but really, I am just focused on this day right here.
Mm-hmm.
Another statement in the big book of AA that I love. In the church, we'll often think about somebody's been around the church for a long time. They have now achieved spiritual maturity. And we have all experienced the kind of self-righteousness and judgmentalism that so often goes along with that, superficial measures of spiritual maturity and so on. And in AA, that notion of one day at a time, and of course that's Jesus, manna for today. You only get manna for today, is very clearly recognized. So in the big book, it talks about we must never rest on our spiritual laurels. What we have at most is a daily reprieve contingent upon the maintenance of our spiritual condition. What we have at most is a daily reprieve. Without that reprieve, without God's help today, I would be back immersed in sin. I would be consumed by my tendency towards pride or self-righteousness or why can't you or envy or comparison or whatever it is. They have another saying in AA, they will sometimes say, who has more sobriety? The guy that hasn't had a drink for 30 years or the guy that hasn't had a drink for a week? And the answer is whoever woke up earliest this morning. One day at a time, just this day.
That's so good. All right, I got to ask you about this. In the book, you talk about that one person that knows everything about you. Some might initially think, well, that should be your spouse. Not necessarily so. And you had found one person that you could, for lack of a better term, confess all of your sin to, and you do this on a daily basis, 6:50 every morning, I believe. Mm-hmm. Your call with Rick. Does he do the same with you? And when you confess something to him, how does he respond to that? Because if we're in that situation, if we want to develop this and we want to be that for somebody else, is it just a thank you for telling me? I'm praying for you. This will be a test of your joy in Christ. Yep. Or what is a typical response after you've just laid your soul bare?
Yes, and there's a whole body of wisdom around this, and that's part of why I wrote the book, was to help people figure out how do you actually do it. Now, and all the steps fit together, by the way. Part of the brilliance of the 12 steps is it's not a smorgasbord.
Right.
Which we often do in churches. This much time in solitude, this much time in meditation. Why? How do they fit together? I don't know. We just, it seems like a good idea. With the 12 steps, again, they didn't get written down till after they worked, and there was a reason why they worked, and there's a connection between them. Step 4 comes before step 5. Step 4 is the fearless and searching moral inventory. And I won't take the time to unpack that now, except to say it was enormously helpful for me to discover that, because for most of us, if all I try to do is sit down and think about and write down everything I've ever done wrong, I will not get very far. Step 4 involves a whole nother approach to the inventory that is much, much more detailed and helpful and time-consuming and illuminating. So that's a real important piece. And then a next step is telling somebody else. And this could be a therapist. It could be a pastor. It could be a member of the clergy. In AA, it will often be a sponsor. I decided that I wanted for it to be a friend of mine, Rick. For sure, it needs to be somebody where they are trustworthy, where they will hold confidentiality, where they won't try to give you advice when it's not wanted, where they will be appropriately vulnerable with you and non-judgmental. So you have to get to know somebody. You can't jump into a relationship like this. Trustworthiness has to be established over a period of time. I don't think that putting a spouse in this position is a good idea, mainly because with my spouse in our marriages, our lives are so mixed in together that very often where I struggle, where I've messed up, it could be around anger, it could be around sexual temptation, it could be around guilt or so, could be around stuff that I don't like. If I tell my spouse, these are going to be issues that we struggle with each other, that we have to work on with each other. So I'm going to be likely to filter and censor myself and be having to worry about how do I navigate communicating this with my spouse in a way that lacks the freedom that I can have with a therapist or with a fully disclosing friend. So, historically with the church, people had confessors. Mm-hmm. And that was the role of that person. And when Martin Luther came along in the Protestant Reformation, the idea was universal priesthood of beliefs. Now we can all be confessors to each other. Mm-hmm. But what's mostly ended up happening is it's not the universal priesthood. It's nobody's a priest anymore. Nobody confesses to anybody. So in my relationship with Rick, I asked him to play that role with me. And I have a few times gone through a very comprehensive Step 4 inventory, which took weeks. And then I would meet with Rick for hours and literally read through all the stuff that I wrote down. It's real important to write down that inventory. And it's many, 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 many pages. And then the first time I did that, and I was so embarrassed and humiliated, and his response was so unexpected. He just looked at me and said, "John, I love you more right now than I have ever loved you in my life." And that experience of being known like I had never been known, and then to be loved in that way was so powerful. So it's another one of those steps where when you think about it ahead of time, it's like, no way, no way, not only no, hell no, I'm not going to do that. But then when you do it, the power on the other side is immense. Interestingly, in the big book in AA, they will say very often it's after step 5 that the desire for drink begins to go away. Huh. So, in churches, it's the hiddenness that kills us.
Right.
I think that's why in the New Testament, the story of Ananias and Sapphira is such a powerful one. Death enters into the community because that's the story where hiddenness enters into the community.
Right.
Hiddenness is the one thing that will always block the power of God. God can forgive anything, but when we hide, we shut ourselves off from that power. So with Rick, that was such a powerful thing for me that the goodness of that relationship outweighs the embarrassment of full disclosure with him. And so we have a daily connection. We did it today, as well as periodically that bigger connection. It's very much a mutual thing with Rick. It's very much we will both confess with each other because I'm using the 12-step in this way. I've done a more formal exercise with it than he has with me. So I don't think he's done a real elaborate step 4, step 5 in the same way, but it is very much mutual in the sense that he will share with me his temptations and guilt in a similar way that I will with him. And I'm very grateful for that relationship.
That's beautiful. I appreciate you sharing that and being so vulnerable in the book as well. The book is amazing, John. I loved it. I love all your works. I've mentioned many times on the podcast, and we've talked about it before. Soul Keeping is the one I reread every year, given it to many people, and one of which was my daughter, who loved it, and she gave it to classmates at college, and they loved it and continue to go over it and over it again. I'm so grateful for you and your faithfulness through many hard times to continue to write and share and communicate, because it is such a blessing to me and to countless others. I want to just close with this, because I think we're always learning, we're always growing, let me say it this way, Christ is always revealing himself to us in new and fresh ways. What are you learning about Jesus right now that you're focused the most on, or most surprised, not even surprised, but in awe of?
One of the things that Dallas would talk about is what a good thing it is to just bring the presence of Jesus back into our minds over and over and over, and that focusing deeply on certain passages of Scripture can be a good way of doing that. And so John 14 and 15 have been a passage that I've been kind of living with for a while. And, this is stuff that he was saying to his disciples right before he was going to be crucified. And so it's a moment of, indescribable pain and agony for him and for them. And to have in the midst of that, it's in that context that he says to them, "These things I have said to you so that my joy might be in you and your joy might be complete," or filled up or running over. And so thinking about Jesus as a joyful, deeply joyful person, because he says, "my joy," and he couldn't have said that if the disciples did not perceive him as a deeply joyful person. Their response wasn't, "What'd you say?" And then his expression, again, on the night when he's getting ready to go to the cross. "And I'm teaching you these things so that this joy that characterizes me will be in you, and not just in you a little bit, not just there, occasionally, but overflowing in you." So seeking, how do I more and more and more live in that joy? And of course, we all find this, Rusty, when we're around somebody, to be around a joyful person is one of the best gifts in the world. It's just life-giving to anybody. So it can sound almost selfish at first. I'd like to be a more joyful person. But actually, for anybody listening to us right now, if you're a friend or you're going to work, or if you're part of a family, a son or a daughter, or brother or sister, or mom and dad, there's no gift you give like being a joyful person to be around. So the joyfulness of Jesus and his desire to be a joy bringer in my life is a wonderful truth that I'm working on living with.
That's amazing. Thank you, John. Thanks for coming on the podcast again. Always a blessing. I appreciate it, brother.
Thank you. Take care.
Well, John, we're so grateful for the hours worth of time we got with you. And I want to encourage everybody to check out his podcast, Becoming New, and encourage everybody to get a copy of his latest book called Steps. If you haven't subscribed to this podcast, you can do so wherever you get your podcast. And if you didn't know, we're on YouTube now. We already have, I think, thousands of subscribers there. Love for you to join us over there and watch along as you listen. So you're able to catch some of the things that we hold up and talk about and point to, and seeing John's office was awesome as well. So anyway, thank you so much for listening. Make sure you share this with a friend, and we will see you next week with brand new content. As always, keep it simple.